slides, which have a lot of animation because I finally mastered animation, so I have too much of it. So I hope if I'm in your way, just say so. So thank you so much, Dominique and Claire, for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here. I really want to thank Claire for suggesting a reading. Did you guys do the reading? Excellent, because it helped actually for me organize some of my thoughts for the talk. So you'll see me reference it. I found it actually to be really helpful, and actually I'm close colleagues with all the folks that were mentioned in that article, so I can say more about that if that's of interest. So what I want to do over the next few minutes is give you a sense of who we are at Discovery Outreach, who we partner with, how we try to unify a lot of disparate objectives when it comes to science engagement on the part of organizations that don't specialize in science engagement. They have lofty goals and they look to us to address them. And it turns out, and you saw this in the article, that live science events really can do wonders and can bring a lot of things together, especially if they're able to be partnered with a fantastic social science collaborator like we have here at Life Science Communication, allowing us to ask new research questions, learn new things about audiences, and take things to the next level. That's what's really exciting to me, so I hope to touch on that as we go. I'm comfortable taking questions throughout, but I'm guessing you might like this to be a straight-up lecture and Q&A at the end. Is that the preferred format? Okay, well then that's what we'll do. Great, so let me just get you oriented in terms of Discovery Outreach. We actually are kind of an affiliation of a couple of different institutions that staff us. So we are made up of WARF staff and Morgridge Institute for Research staff, but we serve and we're really a committed partner with WARF, the Morgridge Institute for Research, the Wisconsin Institute for Discovery, which is the other research institute in the building that you all incorrectly call WID. We prefer that you call it Discovery. WID is one of 3 organizations that make their home in that building. And then of course the broader campus. And since it's technically impossible to represent 4 sides of a cube in a 2D projection, I've added UW here. It's actually really not possible. So we try to serve and align what we do with the missions of those organizations, UW as a whole, with Morgridge and WARF. And that's complicated and also maybe not so complicated. And so we're in the process right now, as Dominique mentioned, of reconvening our Town Center Advisory Board, and we have the leaders of those organizations at the table I'm trying to get them to articulate what is it that you want us to do for you? What do you want to point to in terms of the activities that we have at the Discovery Building that you can say are mission central for you? And so they're in the process of articulating that. In this slide, I've sort of oversimplified very broadly the missions of these 4 organizations. Obviously, this is a gross oversimplification. The shared goal that they all agree on right at the outset is that they want to see UW-Madison research connect to the broader community that embraces UW-Madison, the Wisconsin idea, right? That's easy for everybody. How we do that and what they look at on the face of that cube, and I'm actually getting Rubik's Cubes made of the organizations so that we can all play with that, because my idea is the Rubik's Cube is the team. We are something discrete. We have discrete functions, discrete staff. There's things we do. How we align those spaces and those activities to address each of these specific organizations, that's the challenge. But it turns out, as you saw, that live public science events maybe can be that unifying approach. And so that's kind of what I'm going to talk about. And it's something that we're actively defining as a working group right now. So in this article, that should not have been too painful to read. It was pretty breezy. John Durant, the author, who's also on the Scientific Advisory Board of the Morgridge Institute, posits that live science events can do everything from generate new relationships with audiences, reshape institutional involvement in science communication. I'll talk about all of these as we go. Bring scientists and the public together, produce unique, meaningful outcomes based on the kinds of formats that they offer, offer opportunities for novel research, and we're doing some of that with Dominique and Dietram and colleagues. And create world peace. No, I'm making that up. But that's kind of why not? Why not? I mean, there's a lot that can happen through this format. It turns out everyone on the planet is born curious, and we all have some natural affinity to science. And our challenge, I think, is to figure out how do we tap into that, and how do we harness that for good, right? So I'd like to ask you maybe, I hope this is okay with the format, to just name a few kinds of formats of life science events that you think of right away when you think of this kind of opportunity. What are some things that you've experienced in terms of life science events? I know Tom has lots of experience. Come on, Tom. Like, Wednesday night at the
Family
lab.
Science Nights.
Family Science Nights, Wednesday night at the lab, a famous, incredibly long-running program here on campus. Other things that folks have experienced either here or elsewhere.
Washburn Observatory.
Mm-hmm, sure, yep, going to science centers, observatories, places like that.
Nerd night?
Yep, nerd night,
Saturday Science.
Saturday science, or
Science.
sorry?
Barn tours.
Did you say bar?
Barn tours.
Yeah, barn tours, sure.
Leave
I
me
thought you said-
off.
I'm trying to say something in bars, because there's also a lot of things in bars. Nerd night's often in bars, there's often a
Science
scientist
on Tap?
walked into a bar events, I'm sorry?
Science on Tap.
Yep, Science on Tap, exactly. So the whole gamut, science cafe, science festivals, there's a huge gamut of them. On our team, our formula for creating life science events always follows this pattern of you take science. You guys know something called the Noun Project? It's got the best icon, check it out. So this was one of the icons for science. You add a science engagement professional of some kind, and the people on my team span the gamut from former secondary school teachers to folks that have worked in museums to folks that have managed events like events in bars. And then you get events, and these events can be lots of different shapes of things. On our team, we have a full spectrum of events. This slide, I apologize, is a little small to read, but I meant it to convey sort of the entirety of offerings. So my vision for the programs has always been, whoever you are on the planet, you should find at least one program at Discovery that is appealing to you. So if you're in school and you're a kid or you're a teacher, we have a suite of offerings for K-12 students and teachers that are sort of co-curricular, take place during the school day, during the school year, or follow that kind of format like camps, etc. If you're a family with kids, you should find some way to engage as a family. If you're an adult and you don't have kids or you don't want to be with your kids, there's ways for you to engage that way. If you're a member of the UW-Madison community, whether you're a scientist or you're a member of the staff, or you're just curious about science and you happen to be in the community, whether you want to participate as a presenter or as a consumer, you can find a way in that way. So we're really trying to think about capturing everybody somehow. Not that every program has to be appealing to everybody, because that wouldn't be the case. We know that teenagers and middle schoolers will not go to programs that appeal to elementary school kids, for example, but that there's at least one thing. So that's been our approach, and that's kind of the set of offerings that we have. It's a sort of fungible, moving portfolio. We have programs that have been really successful that we keep, like Saturday Science. We have others that have served a purpose and then sort of that's ebbed and then they've kind of gone away, they might get reborn. So we really are a dynamic team that way. But that's our concept of life science events. And when we think about what we think we can get from them, sort of speaking to these objectives that the Science Life article talked about, we know and we've seen them be influential in reshaping institutional involvement in science communication and science engagement. And we can talk a little bit about that, but there are literally hundreds of faculty who, whether it's through events like Wednesday Night at the Lab, or science expeditions, or programs that our team puts out, that get involved that have never been involved before. Those are folks that are scientists that are entering that community of folks that want to figure out how to communicate. It's a format for communication. Oftentimes they then get lured into getting active in social media or other things that might even extend their commitment beyond working with a life science event. We know that we can get STEM practitioners involved, and we're really interested, and I'll talk about this in a little bit more in a minute, kind of like the Aldous Center in helping scientists become more confident, more experienced, and frankly just better at communicating about their science. We know that, and studies show that it's well established that informal science engagement experiences are at least as valuable, if not more valuable, than classroom-based experiences. And it turns out that these events can factor into that kind of impact. So in terms of the participants, the attendees who come, we know that we can have an impact on them, and we've been studying that with Dietram and Dominique and others to get really measurable effects. And then we're really interested in how we can harness the amazing strengths that we have here on campus in social science research to ask probing questions about audiences, motivations, demographics, outcomes, that kind of thing, when it comes to engaging these audiences. And we're just, I think, at the cusp of what's possible with all of that. We've been doing it for a few years, but there's so many questions, and they keep leading to more things, more grant applications, etc. So that's kind of what we're trying to do. The way we do it, We have we're really fortunate on our team to have a lot of latitude in how we learn from our programs, reinvent them, expand and move in new directions. And so I want to sort of talk about this four-pronged approach that we have found to be effective, that we're really continuing to invest in. And it starts with growing the pool. And what I really mean by that is growing the pool of scientists and science expertise that we can bring into our process. And I'm gonna share some details about how we do that, but that is really this process of bringing more people in, students, faculty, staff, who want to be involved in providing their content and engaging various publics around what they do, bringing their passion into the space of the life science events. We're very much aware that there are some people who gravitate to that kind of activity and some people who just don't think it's for them or they don't have time. And we're really trying to change that equation and show them that you don't have time not to. It's really going to be beneficial for you in a lot of other aspects of your work if you can hone these skills and encourage your students to hone these skills. And so we've been doing a lot to expand our offerings, and Travis Tangent on my team partners with Tom on some of these programs, and they've really been successful, and I'll talk more about them in just a minute. We also really want to dig into what we mean by public, right? So there's no public, there are multiple publics, all of us fit into multiple publics. Who are these people? What's motivating them? Why do they come to some things and not others? How can we reach them more effectively? How can we do a better job of understanding what they're interested in and then telling them that they might find what they're interested in if they were to come to certain events. So really sort of co-create some things. So we're spending a lot of energy on, that's a different kind of pool that we're growing, trying to grow the potential attendees of our events, participants in our events, by expanding into these publics and understanding them better. That said, once people start coming, we're different from a museum or a science center in some ways in that a lot of museums, right, you might go once a year, you might go when you visit the town. We really want people to come all the time. So we have Saturday Science every month, and we have after-school expeditions every week, and we have Crossroads of Ideas every month. We want people to keep coming back, and so we have to keep it fresh. We have to keep it interesting. We have to have that brand that people know. This is not a one-and-done kind of a place. This is a place that it's worth finding out what's going on there all the time because it's always getting refreshed. And so that's a challenge and something that really fits into our whole approach to creating this effective programming. And then finally, we need to evaluate what we're doing. We need to understand what other people are doing. We need to ask hard questions, prune things that aren't working, expand things that are, and just have a spirit of continuous improvement. And that's a big part of our operation. So in my concept, all of these things are what undergirds what we're doing all the time and how we justify what we have our staff do and what we invest in and what we pursue in terms of funding. Okay, so I'm going to go through each of these arrows a little bit more detail on some than the others, but to just give you a sense of what this actually looks like. So growing the pool, how are we engaging with more scientists? So we have this new offering for a course. I think the first time we did it was last fall of 2017. Called Illuminating Discovery, and it's a partnership with a professional science storyteller who's done some work at the Alda Center for Science Communication, a professional science illustrator, and Travis Tangent on our team who has been trained through Portal to the Public, which I'll mention, in how to help scientists use manipulatives and hands-on demonstrations and engagement at a tabletop exhibit to convey information about their science. And so we created this new course, and it's been remarkably successful. We offered it a second time this past fall for graduate students and postdocs to get more confidence and more experience and more skills in all kinds of science engagement, whether it's at a tabletop exhibit, giving a talk, talking to their peers, producing written content, working on their visual presentations, all of that. And so coming out of that, we've had a number of scientists who now just show up at Saturday Science, so they go into the schools, they love it, they're passionate about it. So our master plan, right, is to get more and more students, faculty, and staff in this space of people that really just love doing this and feel good doing it. Another approach to doing that is, and this is hard to see, but we are partners with Science here on campus on a grant through NSF to look at pairings between universities and science centers and understand the interface that those pairings create between primary research and science engagement. and then develop best practices that can be shared with other institutions. And so we've been part of this grant for a couple of years and have been running workshops for faculty across campus to help them think about what's called their broader impacts requirement, which is something that National Science Foundation has for researchers, that they have to have an activity that really helps them extend the benefits of their work into the broader society. So this program helps researchers figure out how do they want to do that, and then how can they be confident doing that, and how can they create a successful, sustainable mechanism to have that broader impacts, and how can we, through our programs, help address some of those needs. We won't be ever the complete solution, but for many folks, the programs that we offer, or things that we could offer, are good fits for their broader impacts. And so that's another way that we're growing the pool of faculty groups on campus that want to have a sustainable commitment to public engagement. And then lastly, I mentioned Portal to the Public. This is another NSF-created program that is based out of Seattle Science Center, Pacific Science Center in Seattle, all about helping scientists be very comfortable translating what they do through hands-on activities to broad audiences. And so we've been running workshops. Tom and Travis on my team run workshops regularly for, again, graduate students, faculty, postdocs, staff, et cetera, to become confident doing that. And then we make them participate in one of our programs, whether it's Science Expeditions or Saturday Science or the Science Festival. So again, we're growing the pool of presenters and scientists who really see this as a way that they do their work. Okay, so then I'm going to look at the next arrow, the other horizontal arrow, expand our understanding of publics. Who comes to our events? What do they come for? And more importantly, actually, who isn't coming? So in a few slides, I'll show you that we have tens of thousands of people every year that we engage with. That's great. There's millions of people in Wisconsin that we're not engaging with. Why not? Who are those folks? The whole field of science engagement, right, really recognizes that there's this quieter problem, right? You get people, the minute you have the word science in something, right, then you've already selected for people who are comfortable attending something in science. Well, that's not most people. So what do we do about that? We know that we all have a connection to science. We're born with it. How do we stratify that? There's some studies that show that there's like 4 tiers. There's people that identify as not interested, which I question. I think they could be interested, but they identify as not interested. There's some that are interested, there's some that are engaged, and then there's some that are enthusiastic. Most science centers attract enthusiastic people. We're trying to figure out who are we getting, how far up that stream can we go, and what do our programs have to look like, and what does our outreach need to look like to be effective. And so we're starting to dig into that with some studies. And I'm showing you some data that I'm going to be presenting at a poster next week. This was partly done in combination with a grant we're part of called EvalFest through NSF. I'm going to actually show you first some work that we did with Dietrich and Dominique student Kane Korzekva, sorry I skipped ahead, that taught us a little bit about who comes to the Science Festival. And Kane gave me permission to reproduce this one very telling graphic that taught us that in terms of who's coming, not only are we getting enthusiasts, but we're really getting a really rarefied slice of the community. So it's just one of several data sets that Kane had in his master's thesis, but this shows, you can see very clearly that, okay, our attendees do not look like the community. That's great that they're coming. We have tens of thousands of people. That's not everybody. What do we need to do? So this was, really, we had a feeling it looked like this, but we didn't know it was quite that extreme. Honestly, it was really illuminating. And then in terms of this study that I mentioned, we did an outgroup study trying to understand people that go to family science nights in their community schools, which the attendance at those events looks very much like the community. Attendance at our events does not. So we went to those events and we asked people, okay, so have you heard of the Science Festival, first of all? Most of them had not. So that's an important thing to know. Like, they can't come if they don't know. So that's like job one for us, right? But then even understanding why they didn't come, well, they think they're too busy. They're at that event, mind you, they're at the Family Science Night, they think they're too busy. So again, that's an opportunity for us to understand how to address our marketing and our offerings. But we did learn that their motivations compared to festival attendees, so festival attendees in red, Family Science Nights in gray, a lot of these line up, right? It seemed fine. They wanted to spend time with their family. It's free. those are all things we can build on in terms of creating a bridge and increasing participation, which gives us access to all those wonderful world peace altering impacts that we can have. So again, this is just a smattering of some things that we've learned from some of the social science engagement and studies that we're running, many more in the pipeline. I just want to show you this very textbook bad slide, just to give you a sense of the scope of our programs and what we see in terms of attendance. This is 2 years of attendance data, one at our field trip program, which runs throughout the year, and then at all of our other events on site. And you can see that attendance pretty much increasing. This has been the trend since we've been capturing data, pretty much steady increase, and tens of thousands of people, right? So tens of thousands of people come into the Discovery Building to engage in science. They weren't doing that 10 years ago when the building wasn't there. That's really good news, and that's a lot of people, but it's nowhere near the scope of people that we could be engaging with. So now I'm going to talk about another arrow where we are. So this speaks to how we're able to keep and expand our audiences, but we have to keep it fresh and we have to keep doing new things. But we also really need to penetrate all those folks who aren't coming and meet people where they are and understand what motivates them. And so we've been doing a lot of that through one of our primary tools, which has been the Wisconsin Science Festival, which I like to think of as our space program. It's sort of a place where we can experiment, we can stretch a bit. It's only 4 days. We can try something wild, and then we can study it, which we've been doing with Dominique and Dietrin's team, trying to understand how did we do? Did we move the needle? Are we attracting different participants? So a couple years ago, an experiment that we did was we wanted to talk about climate change. Everybody in science engagement wants to talk about climate change. Everybody in science engagement knows the minute you say something about climate change, you're only getting the enthusiastic people. You have no prayer of anybody further upstream, or just none. They're not going to come. So we structured an event that we called, I forget what we called it, but it was all about outdoor recreation and how that's changing. And we had, as a moderator, a person who writes a column on hunting and fishing in central Wisconsin. And then we brought in the organizer of the Berkey ski race. We brought in an expert in fishing. We brought an expert in hunting. To really talk about how these activities are different, and that the Berkey won't be reliably held in northern Wisconsin anymore. These things are changing. And even though the data, when you agglomerated it, didn't show that, we still know that we saw people at this event that we'd never seen before. We saw people in camo and fishing caps, and they had never been there. We had never seen them. I think they were canceled out by the cross-country skiers when you aggregated the data. But it was a really different audience, and the conversation was really different than what it would have been had we pitched this as, terrible things are happening in climate change, we all have to care about it. So that's an example of the kinds of experiments that we can do throughout the Science Festival. We've also been experimenting with different novel kinds of partners. So the festival started out just in Madison the first year. The second year, there were a handful of events around the state. Now the majority of events take place outside of Dane County with partners, again, that are unanticipated, not necessarily the folks that we thought would be our natural partners. So there's a whole group in Eau Claire, based out of the Marshfield Clinic, that's arranged dozens of events in Eau Claire, in bars, in libraries, in schools. And so it's really taken on a life of its own. There's a school, elementary school up in Bayfield that has a big event during the Science Festival every year and brings in a lot of the tribal communities get involved in participating in that event. And again, that was just sort of an organic growth. And so this mechanism provides lots of ways for us to explore different modalities of interaction, different kinds of partners, different motivations, different audiences. And so this is going to continue to be really fertile ground. One thing that we tried this past year was, and something that I learned from talking to others in the Science Festival community globally, is to take science to where people are at a time when they're looking for something fun to do. So we took our Friday night event and moved it to the Capitol Square. We took over the square. We called it Science on the Square, and we had like a couple dozen different venues that had science events. So we had things at the Popcorn Shop on Upper State Street, the Camera Company, Broca, Collectivo, all around the square. Just really different events. Some of them connecting with what the business had to offer, some of them not. but really just trying to go where people are on a Friday night in October and just be in their face. And we had light up, so we launched a new mascot this year, Beasley the Bee, which honeybee is the state insect of Wisconsin, so we had Beasley the Bee. And we had this thing where you could earn light up antenna if you took your picture with Beasley and posted on social media. So we had a ton of people walk around with these light up antenna all over on the square, and it was just really fun and successful. It's kind of a commando event that we promoted it, but I think a lot of people didn't go there for it, but they got swept up in it. We had a science comedy band that took you all around the square. You could get on and do science improv and then get off. And we had several thousand people participate. So we're going to continue to explore that kind of thing, but definitely new ways to get to audiences is to not ask them to set aside time to go to a science activity, but to insert a science activity into where they are. And many people really want to be involved in that. And then on that front, what am I doing here? We also are setting up some additional new collaborations, and I'm really not sure where these things are going to go. I would call this radical collaboration that we're doing with WID, the other institute at the Discovery Building. A couple of initiatives, some more natural than others. So there's this really cool program at WID that if you don't know about, you should look it up, called Tiny Earth, which is a kind of a citizen science program that has people all over the world crowdsourcing new bacteria to see if they can find new antibiotics. It's very cool. So we've been partnering with them on getting students from all around Wisconsin who come to our science camps and our field trips to collect their soil, feed them into this program, and then create a linkage between the farmer whose soil that is and the potential discovery of new antibiotics. And so that's been a great partnership for us. But they're also creating a whole new suite of programs around science and art, including one that's going to be science and street art, where there hopefully will be some murals all around Madison, and this could grow beyond. And we're going to connect some science activities with these murals and see again if we can reach new audiences, new neighborhoods, through completely new entry points, in this case through the arts. And so more to come on that, but we're recognizing that these are the kinds of things that we need to do to really be inclusive and truly be engaging with the public. So with that, I'm just going to wrap up with a few points here. I mentioned throughout my chat some of the ways that we've collaborated with researchers here at Life Science Communication. We have been, through all this work on growing more presenters, been studying the impact on presenters. What happens to a scientist when they get involved in doing this kind of outreach? Are there exciting things that we can identify and then use to get more people to be involved? Or can we modify how we engage them in becoming comfortable with outreach to make sure that there are benefits for them, that it's sort of self-sustaining, so to create more carrots than sticks, right? We've also been working on understanding our current audiences, learning about who's not coming, expanding our programming. A lot of this work has told us that we need to modify how we promote our events and how we're communicating with folks, and we made those changes that, like certainly Kane's work right away led us to increase our social media footprint, for example. It's really straightforward kinds of outcomes. And then hopefully going forward, as mentioned in the Science Live article, that we can even explore some new kinds of interactions and ask some new research questions. I really do think at this university we have a rare confluence of resources and interest and expertise to advance both the field of research and science communication as well as actual science engagement programs, and really bridge that distance between research and practice, that we have this rare confluence of things between the Wisconsin idea, great things that Tom has been doing forever, some things that we're doing in our building, and the work here in this department. So I think we are, I really do believe this article actually is hitting it on the head. I think life science events are a great way to do some of these challenging big things. I don't know about world peace, but maybe. Here's a little anecdote along that line, and I don't think this had a happy ending years later, but during the Arab Spring, if people remember that, in 2011, the first ever conference of Science Festival organizers, which takes place now every year, but the first one took place, and there was someone there from Egypt who had started a Cairo Science Festival in the wake of the Arab Spring. And it really contributed to, just huge numbers of people identifying themselves with science, coming out to science events in the street during that uprising. And so I don't know that it continued very well for those folks. We haven't seen them at future events. But they had a moment, and science was a really crucial part of that moment. It just happened to coincide. So who knows? So with that, I want to thank certainly the team here at Life Science Communications has been incredible partners over the years, and I hope to see that continue. Obviously, our team at Discovery, and then all of our funders and committed partners, NSF, State Office, Grant, or Morgridge, WID, and the university as a whole. And so with that, I would love to take any questions.